Hi, friends. So today I wanted to talk to you about how to go vegan, and this is 10 tips for new vegans. So, firstly, I've been vegan for 13 years plus now. It's been one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I thought I would pass on what I feel are some helpful advice for those who may be thinking of becoming vegan to help us avoid some of the pitfalls that can occur. Please note this is not an exhaustive list, and I invite you to check out my comprehensive vegan resource in podcast form, How to Go Vegan, which covers all these topics in much more detail. So please check it out at howtogovegan.org. So you probably won't commonly hear some of the advice online, some of this advice anyway, and so I hope you'll stay around to the end. So firstly, we need to internalize a strong ethical position. And just checking to see if people can hear me on this live stream. So if we want to have a meaningful and lasting commitment to something, we need to first understand what it is and what our motivations are. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this first one because it's the most important. So as new vegans, we need to understand what veganism is, what our motivations are for going vegan, and that will help us internalize the ethical position. So I'll just check again and make sure people can you hear me okay? That's great. Okay, so why should we go vegan? There's a number of explanations, and here's a short one. So we're all animals on this planet, both human and non-human. Non-human animals, and that includes aquatic animals, are sentient just like us. They have self-awareness and relate to others and to the world. They love life, and just like us, they don't want to suffer and they don't want to die. And because they are sentient, they are not things. They are not resources. They are fellow earthlings, and we are all interconnected. This planet is their home as well as ours. And although we are led to believe in the dominant ideology that non-human animals are our property and are our resources, that doesn't make it so. Some groups of humans were commonly viewed as property during times of legal slavery. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. Unfortunately, we are a species that have held and continue to hold a number of unfortunate discriminations based on otherizing throughout history, discriminations such as racism, sexism, heterosexism, and so forth. And this otherization has led and continues to lead to great violence. Speciesism is no different. It's based on otherizing a whole group based on an irrelevant criterion, species. And this has led to more violence and killing of animals in 4 days than all humans killed or have died through homicide, genocide, wars, and plagues throughout human history. That's a really amazing, thing to contemplate. Speciesism is one of the ways we otherize sentient beings so that we can then exploit them. Just because non-human animals are different to us and have different abilities, different cognitive functions, and are not like us, in quotes, it does not mean they are lesser. Likewise, it does not also mean that they cannot do lots of amazing things, that they can do lots of amazing things that we can't. And that does not make our species lesser either. We're all different, we're equally sentient, and equally morally important. And because non-human animals are a different species, does not mean they are our resources to do with as we wish. To do so makes us a bully of the most vulnerable group on the planet. We should not exploit and kill animals simply because we can. To do so makes us human supremacists. We don't need to use them at all to survive and to thrive. Moreover, other animals do not need our quote-unquote compassion. They do not need our quote-unquote mercy. They just need us to go vegan and stop using them. It's the least we can do. This is the main reason to be vegan. So, am I making sense at the present time? That's good to hear, Gary, that you're vegan. This is what I'm talking about right now is the main reason to be vegan. If we internalize this vegan ethic, we will always be vegan. It will enrich our life and the way we view other animals and the planet. It won't matter if we're the only vegan left on Earth. We won't make compromises or excuses. We will always be vegan. When we hear of folks saying, oh, I used to be vegan and I became sick, or, oh, I used to be vegan, but I had to stop because of, and fill in the poor excuse here. These are, forgive me, very baseless and weak excuses. Over the years, doing vegan education, I've heard them all. To be frank, I would assert these few people were never vegan, because someone that is truly vegan for the right reasons, ethical reasons, will never, ever go back to eating, wearing, and using animals. In other words, there's no such thing as an ex-vegan, because once you get it, you will never be able to unring that bell. There's just no going back, and who would want to, really? Some folks who unfortunately call themselves ex-vegans were either plant-based dieters for health reasons, or for environmental reasons, or for some other reason. Animals were probably not central to their decision, if at all. They didn't stay vegan because they were never vegan. They may not have been given the right information at the time, or may have been given morally confused information. There's a lot of that out there. And as I said, their motivations probably did not include non-human animals. Of course, there are folks who say they've gone vegan for environmental reasons, but if we understand how the term vegan came into being by Donald Watson in in the UK in 1944, we understand that non-human animals should be at the core of our decision. If animals are not at the core, then if it becomes inconvenient for some reason, we may return to consuming animal products and wearing animal products and generally using animals. We need to internalize the ethical position on why we should be vegan. Once we have this, it won't matter where we are or what is happening around us, whether we are in a room full of people who are eating animal products and there's not a plant-based option in sight, and it won't matter if we are feeling some pressure, possibly from a family member or a friend, and they may not want us to be vegan because our very existence bothers their conscience and reminds them of what they're engaging in. The simple fact is, we do not need animal products at all to be completely healthy. In fact, in the amounts our society is eating them, children are literally developing atherosclerosis, which is fatty streaks in the arteries, and developing diabetes because animal fat causes insulin resistance in the muscles. And literally millions of people every year are dying directly from illnesses and diseases related to the consumption of animal products. The torture and killing of 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year who loved life just as we do is completely unnecessary. And if we believe it is wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering and death on sentient animals, which we witness all the time, again and again on social media, when the public is outraged when animals are harmed, then we agree already with the reasons to be vegan. So if we're outraged about all these various animals that are killed, Cecil the lion and all these different animals, we already have the reasons to be vegan in our hearts because all animals are sentient. So whether we have acknowledged this to ourselves or not in our hearts, we are unable to ignore that animals, not just the ones we fetishize, are sentient. They love life just as we do and do not want to die. So I could talk more about this, but I'm trying to keep this as concise as possible. So this will do for now. So I invite you to check out my comprehensive vegan resource. You can see it in the frame there. It's in podcast form and it's called How to Go Vegan. So that's howtogovegan.org to explore some what I think are really good podcast episodes which will assist you. So you can listen to them at your leisure. It addresses in more detail all the points I'm going to make here and more. So the second tip, so that was a rather long one, that first one, but that's the most important reason, the most important tip for any new vegan is to internalize the ethical position, and then you'll never, ever go back. Once you've internalized it, you'll never, ever go back. So this second reason, second tip is don't be anxious. Instead, be joyful about being vegan. Just know that you are far from alone. There's nothing remotely weird or extreme about being vegan. Refusing to participate either directly or indirectly in violence or injustice is not extreme. It's the right thing to do, so feel good about that. There are literally tens of millions now of people who self-identify as vegan on the planet, and it's no longer a fringe movement. So when we become vegan, we are joining a very big and exponentially growing community of people who hopefully have the ethics of veganism in their hearts and in their minds. So it's unstoppable at this point. And I would anticipate that in 10 years, there will be a very significant percentage of the global community who will be vegan to the extent that it will be completely commonplace. And that paradigm shift will mean significant and wonderful changes in the way we live, think, and view the world, and how we view the majority of the planet's population who are non-human. It will also significantly impact in beneficial ways climate change and the sixth mass extinction, since animal agriculture is the greatest driver of climate change and the sixth mass extinction. And if you want to find out more about that, you can check out the documentary Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret. And there's also, made by the same producers, I think, of Cowspiracy, there's also Seaspiracy, which I don't think has been released yet. And that shows the devastation on the oceans and what the health is about nutrition. And those three documentaries are very interesting, so check them out. So let's be happy about the understanding how important veganism is in our own lives for other animals and for the planet. And that is a moral imperative. It's a wonderful realization. So tip number 3, do some research on nutrition from reliable sources. It doesn't take much research to work out how to have optimal health as a vegan, but it requires a little research from reliable sites. To say online is swamped with misinformation and disinformation about veganism is an understatement. So I've provided information on nutrition in my podcast, howtogovegan.org, and it addresses some of the mainstream myths. One issue that is addressed is the importance of vegans taking B12. And don't let anyone tell you that B12 is not necessary if one is vegan. B12 is a cheap and easy over-the-counter supplement that can be taken daily. B12 comes from a simple microbe that used to be present on plants and in the water. But with industrialization and processing, this has been removed. Hence, that's why vegans in particular need a regular source of B12. And it turns out that people who are non-vegan also need that these days anyway. So How to Go Vegan podcast also addresses the health issues in relation to animal products. And please note, I'm not selling anything on How to Go Vegan, nor do I make any financial gain from it. I just made it because I thought it would assist people in going vegan. And as I said, the first tip, which is to internalize the ethical position, that to me is the most important thing we can do. So that's why I created that podcast. So I just want people to go vegan, basically. So the fourth tip is don't think that becoming vegan is going to be expensive, or that it is extreme, or that you are going to suffer protein deficiency or become sick and weak, or that you need to buy faux plant-based animal products. As a new vegan, one can make the mistake of buying vegan junk food, or think that one needs to buy plant-based products that emulate animal products. Some may find that faux animal products are a good transitional food, and that's fine if you wish to do that, but it's not necessary. And for one's health, it's important to do one's best to avoid vegan junk foods, which are on the increase. The reason being is that they're not only expensive and unnecessary, but they're not very good for us. After all, and this isn't a judgment on those who like to eat fake bacon or, the plant-based, sort of other animal products like that. But there's just so many wonderful and delicious plant-based meals we can eat. We really don't need to be trying to buy things that emulate animal products. Sure, if it helps people make the transition, that's fine. But trust me, eventually you'll get over that pretty quickly anyway. So to be healthy, all we need is a balanced plant-based diet full of leafy greens, legumes, beans, grains, berries, etc. So eating a whole food plant-based diet can easily be done on a budget. It's a myth that eating a vegan diet, a diet free of dairy, eggs, meat, honey, etc., is quote-unquote elitist or expensive. Of course, if we are buying commercially made vegan junk food, it would be expensive. But as I said, it's not good for us and it's not necessary. I often reference nutritionfacts.org, which is a science-backed nutrition site. It's not a vegan site because, as I stress, veganism is an ethical position. Nutritionfacts.org by Dr. Michael Greger has the latest in nutrition science, and it's very useful and presented in easy 2-minute video presentations. And please note, I have a disclaimer about any external sites that I reference. It's important to note that it is nutrition from plants, that it is not difficult to obtain nutrition from plants and other non-animal sources. It is much easier to do so than if we were eating animal products. Doing little research gives us confidence and will help us easily dispel many of the mainstream myths about plant-based diets. A balanced plant-based diet is delicious and varied and is everything and more we as vegans need to be healthy. It has more than enough protein. In fact, I read a statistic said vegans eat 75% more protein than they would use every day. So there's literally thousands of plant-based cooking social media sites and channels that demonstrate how to make delicious, simple, and budget-conscious plant-based meals. Social media, in particular Instagram, is full of gorgeous vegan food photos. I would need many lifetimes to make all the wonderful and culturally diverse plant-based dishes. I have personally become quite a good cook since becoming vegan, and I'm much healthier and happier. Always, and the fifth tip is always have some vegan food with you when you're out, just in case. So it's really simple. When we are a new vegan, we forget that there may be no plant-based options at a cafe or at a friend's house. If we are invited to a friend's place for dinner, just to let them know that you are vegan, and hopefully they will accommodate you at a dinner gathering. If folks are making arrangements for a night out at a restaurant, ask if you can do a little bit of research on the various restaurants around and find out one with a few vegan options. Vegan options are becoming more and more commonplace every day, but the simple message here is just do a little planning and always have some trail mix or something vegan you like to eat with you, so that if you're caught in a place where there's no vegan food, then you have something to eat. it becomes habit very quickly. But as I said, many cafes and restaurants have a few vegan options, and if they don't, you should ask them to consider it, even just as a good business measure, because there will be more and more vegans, and there are. It's exponentially growing. So it's the sixth tip out of these 10 tips. And as I said, this isn't an exhaustive list. Non-vegan clothing and shoes and other items. So don't stress out immediately about the need to remove clothing, shoes that are made from animal products, but we should try to remove them and replace them as soon as is humanly possible. It's quite easy to find alternatives to wool, leather, etc. today in particular. The sad fact is that animal products are pervasive in our non-vegan society. They're in our computers, our chairs, on the roads, in car tires and so forth. And so it's almost impossible to remove all animal products from our lives unless we live in a cave and eat nettles. However, we can easily avoid eating animal products, and we can avoid them in our clothing and so forth. After all, why would we want to wear the skin of another sentient animal on our backs or on our feet? We just need to do what is humanly possible to avoid as best we can anything that involves the enslavement of animals. So tip number 7 is try to only promote veganism and nothing less than veganism. This is something that some vegans have problems with, and I'm going to explain why it's important that we just promote veganism. After we've been vegan for a while, we have this impulse to spread this important message to others, and that's a good impulse. But firstly, we should always resist a paternalistic attitude toward non-human animals. And what do I mean by that? Speaking about them in speciesist ways as if they are sweet little things that need our compassion and mercy. I've heard some cringeworthy statements from animal advocates about animals, which really just feeds into our speciesism, and we've got enough of that. Animals are just individuals of another species and deserve our respect. If we ask the public to go vegan, then we're asking them to recognize this about animals and to be just and to be nonviolent. That's what animals need from us, and it's the least we can be to be vegan. Second, we should try to avoid the pitfalls of becoming involved with large animal organizations. Why? That is touched on in my podcast, howtogovegan.org. But suffice to say, the main focus of large animal organizations tend to be on bringing in donations from the public. That means single-issue campaigns are fundraising vehicles where the vegan message is often sacrificed if it is mentioned at all. If it is mentioned, it is often watered down or presented as a diet only or an option, and it is often conflated with vegetarianism along with the promotion of so-called quote-unquote humane animal use. So veganism and vegetarianism are not the same. One still involves eating, wearing, and using animals. There can also be other speciesist positions that are promoted by these large animal organizations, which often lead the public to make morally confused choices instead of going vegan and ending their animal use altogether. Large organizations tend to target animal industries, but this is wrong-headed. And you might ask why, and the truth is those animal industries would not exist if most of the public were vegan and were not creating demand for those animal products in animal use. And sadly, large animal organizations often tend to promote to the public the idea that it's morally acceptable to use animals as long as it's done, quote-unquote, humanely. This idea of quote-unquote humane animal use is a morally confused position that causes further suffering and death for many billions of animals each year. And it is also a speciesist position which is contradictory to what veganism is. There are vegan support groups, and sadly within those groups you may find vegans who have come by the way of large animal organizations who may promote speciesist positions, such as I've mentioned. So my advice would be to gravitate towards vegans who just want people to go vegan and to cease all use of animals, including rejecting the so-called myth of quote-unquote humane animal use and quote-unquote humane animal products. When we have a clear, morally consistent position and we impart this to others, this can only bring meaningful and lasting change and will be good for both humans and non-humans and the planet. So the tip number 8 is don't waste time and resources campaigning against factory farming. And I put factory farming in quotes. Now, this might sound like blasphemy coming from a vegan because so many animal advocates today, including much of the public, are against so-called factory farming. We think it's just the worst thing. But what exactly are we doing when we tell the public that they must be against factory farming? First, at the very least, anyone who is against factory farming should be vegan. But why is campaigning against factory farming a waste of time and resources? Well, the reason this industrial-scale animal farming exists is because of the increasing demand for animal products. And so the more animals crammed into these facilities, the less money industry needs to spend to produce these animal products. The more profitable the animal industry will be. So factory farming is economically efficient and meets the growing demand of a growing population. To think we will all be able to go back to mom and pop farms and to hunting is completely fanciful, unrealistic, and unsustainable. Not to mention it still involves violence and it's morally unjustifiable because we don't need these animal products at all to survive. So we're only really doing it for our taste pleasure. So how can we address this issue of factory farming that isn't going away since 1 million plus people are being born every 4 days on the planet? Since industry is going to have to meet that increasing demand, how do we meaningfully address this issue? The answer is simple economics. No demand equals no supply. No demand for animal products from the society means there will be no reason for these industries to exist. The more people who become vegan, the less demand for animal products and animal use, which means less and less factory farms. We strike at the root of the problem, not at the branches. So instead of us beating our head against a brick wall and wasting time and money in a futile attempt to bring an end to factory farming, wouldn't that time and resources be better spent asking people to go vegan instead? But the reason, as I discussed prior, is that single-issue campaigns bring in donations to large animal organizations. So I don't expect large animal organizations to be exclusively asking the public just to go vegan anytime soon because they're a business. Sadly, they will continue asking the public for donations because they are businesses and so they can continue to be a quote-unquote watchdog for industry. That ensures a very sustainable business model, but certainly is no benefit in the long term at all to animals, even in the short term. The other problem with obsessing about ending factory farming is that there are other forms of farming, barn-laid, enriched cages, cage-free, quote-unquote free range, and so forth, which are equally abusive and as crowded and cruel as these so-called factory farms. And if we are vegan and we claim we are against all forms of animal exploitation, we should reject it all. We should not be promoting better ways, better in quotes, ways of doing the wrong thing. We claim we want to abolish all forms of animal exploitation, and the way to meaningful and lasting change is for us to promote morally consistent vegan education only. We don't need ad infinitum single-issue campaigns. We don't need to belong to a large animal organization to do effective advocacy. We can educate the public about veganism very simply in all kinds of creative and nonviolent ways. We don't need to show the public graphic images. I don't show graphic images, and I think my advocacy is as effective. I would argue more effective than shouting at restaurant goers or showing awful traumatic images of animals being killed, etc. We talk about some, I talk about some details of animal exploitation. I'll talk about dairy, what happens in the dairy industry, etc. But it's not necessary to traumatize people to make a point. And in the end, it's not about treatment. It's about how we use animals that is the issue. It's about it's not about how we use them. The fact is, the problem is that we use them at all. That's the problem. So if we internalize that, then it will keep us on track and away from promoting speciesism. So we need to change the discourse and stop talking about treatment and start talking about ending animal use altogether. So we need to ditch the talk about, oh, these animals were treated poorly in this particular facility. You need to increase your animal welfare standards. As I said, it's all about economic efficiency. It has nothing to do with animals. So the truth is, there's no such thing as non-abusive use of animals. If we can internalize that, keep that in our minds, there is no such thing as non-abusive use of animals. And even if there were such a thing, it would still be wrong. It would still be morally wrong. Even mom and pop farms are abusive. Calves are still stolen from their mothers and so forth. And eventually animals are killed when they're not productive. So let's stop buying into this mistaken notion that there are non-abusive ways to use animals. Let's stop buying into the speciesist notion that industry needs to stop, quote unquote, mistreating animals, or that is even possible. Let's stop buying into the mistaken notion that animal industry is ever going to do anything that will infringe on their profits. I mean, we know war is wrong, and we talk about war crimes, but everything about war is a crime. Right? And we know that. And this is the same with animal exploitation. Everything that is exploitative about using animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons, it's all exploitative. It's all wrong. Doesn't matter how nicely we do it. It's all wrong. It's all morally wrong. So let's stop thinking about, quote unquote, animal welfare standards as anything but torture. If these standards were applied to humans, it would be categorized as torture. So let's stop buying into the propaganda that animal industry cares at one iota about animals. They don't. They care about profits because they are businesses, and this is capitalism. The reality is, the only way to end abuse is to end animal use. And that means promoting vegan education and for everybody to go vegan. So that's the bottom line. So tip number 9 for new vegans is don't immediately feel the need to make your friends vegan and your family vegan. It may make us feel more comfortable if our friends and family follow in our footsteps and become vegan, but that's unlikely to happen. And if it does, it will be down the track. It may happen or it may never happen. One cannot predict, but don't make judgments. Remember how long it took for us to wake up to what we were participating in. Sometimes it takes hearing something once, and sometimes it takes hearing something 100 times. And there, unfortunately, are a few people on the planet, a small few, who believe animals do not morally matter at all. Most of us think animals morally matter. You only have to see how we, when we see an animal being harmed or whatever, people become outraged and they try and intervene, etc. But there are a small few people on the planet who don't think they morally matter at all. But don't concern yourself as a new vegan with the latter small group, or even later on. There are plenty of people who think animals morally matter. Everyone comes to veganism in their own time. All we have to do is make sure we wait for an appropriate time to talk about it, basically. And when we talk about it, we need to be clear about it. And we shouldn't ask people to take, quote unquote, baby steps, We shouldn't be asking them to, quote unquote, cut back, or to try meat-free Mondays or fish-free Fridays, and on and on and on. You'll see this all the time. It's just, anyway. And the other half measures that are about, and you may ask why, because if we know something is wrong, then it's wrong. When we know racism is wrong, we don't ask people to only be anti-racist 2 days a week and be racist the rest of the week, or be anti-racist for a month and see how we feel. We reject racism because it's a discrimination, which is harmful and causes violence and death. The same moral consistency applies in relation to speciesism. If we recognize that it's wrong to use sentient animals as resources, then it's all wrong, and we need to reject it all. We shouldn't have one set of rules for humans and a different watered-down set for non-humans. And here's another bit of advice about family and friends. Just as it is not a good idea to try and introduce veganism to people who are eating animal products at a dinner table, it can be tricky finding an appropriate time with those close to us. So here's my suggestion. Just be vegan. You are an example. Just being vegan around people can be enough. Via osmosis, it might take hold, but you can look for appropriate opportunities to talk about it. And you can take some actions as well. For example, make them yummy vegan meals as much as possible. They will see how delicious it all is, how varied it all is, and they're not missing out. They will get to enjoy how wholesome and how incredibly healthy it is at the same time. When I was non-vegan, some of the best meals I ever had in my life were plant-based meals. So, and you can take friends or family to a rescue sanctuary. That's often a really good thing to do. So they meet animals face to face. These animals actually have names instead of numbers and ear tags. And you actually can see, it's right, the sentience is right in front of you. And these wonderful animals at these sanctuaries that have been rescued. And, this is something we should all try and do, is also support sanctuaries and shelters. Hopefully sanctuaries that promote veganism, because if they don't promote veganism, then eventually, they're not stopping the source of all this, which is the non-vegan public. If we were all vegan, there would be no need for these rescue sanctuaries. Anyway, we can show them short videos from nutritionfacts.org, that site I mentioned, and you can introduce them to my podcast, How to Go Vegan. We just need to be creative and morally consistent, and be skillful and clear. And something vegans should never ever do, and that is, we should never ever shame anyone or bully anyone for not being vegan. It's hypocritical, for one thing, since we were all non-vegan, but it also is completely counterproductive. The fastest way to drive someone away from the idea is to shame them and bully them. And the last tip number 10, don't be the kind of vegan who only cares about non-human animals and is not interested in and does not advocate for human social justice issues as well. This is a mistake that a number of vegans make. Veganism is a very, very important issue, as it should be. It will always be at the center of my education efforts, but we should never, ever forsake human social justice issues. It's important that we care about all animals, human and non-human. So as well as being a vegan advocate, we should also show an interest in and advocate for the vulnerable in our society who are human, no matter what country, and as a logical extension, we should also be anti-war. So that's something I think is very, very important, and new vegans need to internalize. Since some may disagree with this advice and would not see it as relevant, and that I find that very sad, but if we recognize the sentience of all and that we are truly all interconnected, then as the saying goes, justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In short, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. So that's pretty much it now. That will do for now. As I said, this is not an exhaustive list, so I hope that you found some of this advice helpful, and you can take what you find helpful and discard the rest. And please, as I mentioned, check out my podcast for more information. I hope that the people in this, there's some, let me see. Whoops. That's a nice comment from someone there. I don't know why that person is reacting like that, but there you go. See, there's actually somebody here who's finding this a very, very threatening topic, and is yeah. But that's how it can be sometimes. People get very threatened and challenged by it, and then start making ad hominem remarks. So I didn't mean to actually put that up on the screen, but there you go. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching. And my name's Trish Roberts. I hope to talk about this more. I've had problems with my live streaming ability at the present time, because I'm living in rural Tasmania, and it's the NBN, which is the National Broadcasting Network in Australia. It's really, really poor in this area at the present time. In the last 3 or 4 weeks, I haven't been able to really do any live streaming at all. And the only reason I can do it right now is because it's actually before people come, the public come home from work, and the download speed actually is sort of reasonable. But after, there's a whole huge chunk of my days where I'm not able to do any sort of live streaming. So it's sort of really cut back on what I'm able to do, unfortunately. And I can do it after midnight, but I'm not always up at that time. It's not always convenient. And so anyway, I'm going to try, and I don't know when they're going to fix the towers in these areas. They don't seem to care about rural people, and it's just gotten worse. And, I used to be able to live stream at pretty much most times of the day, but now it's just really disastrous. We get like 2 to 3 megabytes per second most of the day at the moment. It's really appalling. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I haven't been able to do any live streams lately. And I've just been, but I've been doing vlogs on my faintsignalsfromvega.com, and which is at Vegan Trove on YouTube. So that's what I've been doing. But anyway, I hope to be doing more vegan live streams in the future. And I hope that you'll join me for that. And please share this with others. And please, if you're interested, please subscribe to my channel at Vegan Trove on YouTube. And I hope to see you again. Thanks very much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Till next time. Bye for now.